Ahoy, and welcome. This is Admiral. Here today with news of some consequence for the game and especially the Chronicles series. A few days ago, someone on the AoE2 sub brought up news that Al-Khalim and Sirak, two of the level designers working for CaptureAge on the Chronicles campaigns, had been laid off. One of the users mentions that he found several other people who had worked on Battle for Greece had been laid off as well, mostly in quality assurance. But there doesn't yet seem to be evidence for a more expansive dismissal than that. Even so, the two named individuals were those mainly credited with designing the campaign missions for Battle for Greece, and who had been working on the second installment likely featuring Alexander the Great. The good news is that we are more than likely getting this Chronicles sequel. A new app has already been found in the game files, which typically corresponds to the announcement and release of a new DLC within a matter of months, so I would expect it to arrive in autumn and approximately a year after the premiere. The bad news is that this leaves the future of the Chronicles series beyond that in serious doubt. The obvious implication of letting go of both of your level designers is that you're not intending to design more levels. And despite the modest number of confirmed layoffs as yet, the grand campaign that they played such a large role in creating was such a key feature of Battle for Greece. Of course, there are possible ways to make do with a leaner team with multiple competencies due to budget cuts, or even by reassigning those projects to the level designers at Forgotten Empires. The last option is perhaps the most optimistic scenario, but still implies a significant reduction in overall output if Forgotten Empires level designers are pulling double duty with Chronicles campaigns on top of their standard content. And we ought to be prepared for the possibility that future Chronicles editions may be put on hold, significantly scaled back in scope, or perhaps even abandoned. In one sense, I'm not totally caught off guard here, in that no one ever promised us the development of the game in perpetuity, much less eternal peak levels of staffing, possibly originating in over-optimistic projections from the COVID-era boom. The first Chronicles edition, while excellent, was an experimental alternative mode to the base game, and likely a fairly resource-intensive gamble, with far higher production value, and surely production costs, than a standard AoE2 DLC, yet with a similar price tag for customers. As such, and despite its high quality, in order to yield a similar return on investment as less ambitious DLCs, it would have had to greatly outpace them in sales, which I'm not sure has been the case. So as much as I'd like for that level of effort and investment to be the new standard for AoE2 generally, and of course for an extended Chronicles series, I've always viewed it more as an open question of whether they'd be able to sustain raising the bar to this level over the long haul. Then again, it's possible that profitability is not the primary issue here, as we'll get to shortly. Regardless, even as someone who is more interested in the original medieval core of the base game, it would be disappointing if Chronicles is discontinued or greatly set back, and the team is not able to fully realize their vision. Although I would have expected to hear about a more expansive dismissal if the project were cancelled entirely. So there is a chance that Chronicles will continue development on some level, but perhaps either to a lesser scope or in a longer time frame, if not both. Next up, I want to mention a couple other timely tidbits that I think are relevant to future development, even if not the specific causes of this situation, although they could be. First off is the high number of recent layoffs in tech, and especially by Microsoft, which let go of 9,000 employees this month, and several thousand more earlier this year. For context, that's a small percentage of the total workforce, but still enough to make quite a splash. So I'd frankly be amazed if there wasn't at least a ripple effect on the development of baseline AoE2. If anything, I'm surprised to hear about layoffs at CaptureAge before Forgotten Empires or World's Edge, and to be fair, I haven't cared to go digging into the latest employment status of all of the relevant individuals. So there may be more news on this front before long, especially if layoffs continue in the coming months. There's always the hope that as a tiny portion of Microsoft's empire, AoE2 may largely escape the consuming gaze of the Eye of Sauron, but that remains to be seen. Part of the reasoning behind the layoffs, as I understand it, is Microsoft's attempt to replace much of their human capital with AI agents, in what hopefully will not become the dystopian inversion of the philosopher's dream that it sounds like, wherein humans perform the hard labor and machines create the art.
You didn't earn the knowledge for yourselves, so you don't take any responsibility. Your scientists were so preoccupied with whether or not they could that they didn't stop to think if they should.
But I'm not putting too much stock in the restraint, benevolence, or wisdom of megacorporations in their application of these tools. There's a long discussion that I'll defer about the pros and cons of AI, and by no means is it an inevitable doom machine, nor does it help to have a fatalistic or inflexible attitude towards it, but I'd be naive not to expect it to exert some disruptive pressure in this domain. And in the context of tech, gaming, and specifically Microsoft, already seems to be exacerbating existing attitudes of sometimes treating even good employees as expendable.
Rambo, you're not expendable.
Finally, we ought to mention the final bosses of game termination, under whose shadows developers have always had to labor, namely out-of-touch executives and good old-fashioned corporate greed. I'm reminded of an anecdote by Sandy Peterson, a former developer at Ensemble Studios, which produced AoE 1, 2, and 3, Star Wars Galactic Battlegrounds, Age of Mythology, and Halo Wars. Sandy ascribes the closure of Ensemble Studios in large part to self-serving short-sightedness on the part of an executive, looking to maximize personal profit in the present at the expense of future value. Again, that may or may not be directly relevant here, and I'm hoping that particular piece of history will neither repeat nor rhyme with the near future, but we ought to acknowledge the possibility. For now, we can only speculate as to the role these factors are or will be playing in the current situation. But whether there's a major storm brewing or merely a stretch of choppy waves to weather, I think it's important at least to get a sense for which way the wind is blowing. To sum things up, at best, this may just be an unfortunate, but more or less standard shakeup or delayed correction for overly optimistic projections from a prior era, resulting in mild delays or a more modest scope for some future projects. Or it may portend deeper and more disruptive changes to come, up to and including cancellations of previously planned projects. We'll have to see. Not my first choice of topic by any means, but it seemed worth talking about, especially in light of the controversy avoidance of official communications. As for myself, I maintain some room for optimism because whatever happens, or doesn't, Definitive Edition has made a great many improvements and added more useful tools and assets than I ever thought would exist when Ensemble Studios stopped working on the game. And not least because the player base still has a large core of talented and passionate people, of the sort that have kept AoE 2 relevant through multiple periods where it lacked official support or development. In terms of official content, I'll still hope for the best and prepare for the worst. But independent of that, I have a lot of trust and admiration for the community. Improvise, adapt, overcome, keep calm, and... If you want to follow Al-Khalim, he has a YouTube channel featuring gameplay, news, and especially scenario editor tutorials. He hasn't been active on there for quite a while, for obvious reasons, but has hinted at making a comeback with his newly acquired skills. On that topic, the only other channel I'm aware of that specifically features editor content, and is current, is called Aussie Empires, so check him out if that interests you. If you have any particular insight or knowledge about this situation we've discussed, as well as more general opinions, let me know in the comments. That's all for today, and thanks for watching. This has been me chronicling a controversial corporate culling that could be a chronic condition for Chronicles. Till next time.